Welcome to Better Relationships, Better Life, where relationships expert Judy K. Herman and her guests share insights that can help you move through conflicts in your 9-to-5 jobs and your 24/7 lives. Crack the clarity code and create deeper connections beyond the messiness of relationships. Here's your host, Judy K. Herman.
A lot of what we discuss on this podcast is relevant to workplace relationships and your professional life. You can build a more cohesive organization where people feel heard and respected. As a speaker and executive coach, I support organizations and leaders. Do get in touch with me about how I can help your company with communication and relationships. Just go to judyspeaker.com. Our topic today is navigating relationship ecosystems with radical self-awareness. I'm pleased to host my colleague, Rebecca Wong. Let's listen in. Welcome to Better Relationships, Better Life. My name is Judy K. Herman, and I have a very special guest today, Rebecca Wong. She is a relationship therapist, mentor, and creator of the Connectfulness method for restoring the connection to the self, others, and the world. Rebecca created the Connectfulness method to bypass symptoms of disconnection and address the root cause, because when we're disconnected from ourselves, and when that relationship with the self is off, every other relationship is necessarily affected. Mm-hmm. So, and Rebecca also hosts the Connectfulness Practice podcast, but you've hosted some other podcasts too. Yeah. Rebecca, you're doing so many wonderful things in this world. I'm so glad to connect with you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Judy.
You're welcome. Yeah. So we're going to be talking, a lot of the folks that are listening to this podcast are entrepreneurial couples. They may or may not be familiar with therapy. And I want them to get to know you as a real person who helps couples. And you have your own unique methods. And I want you to focus on what you were sharing with me earlier about U-turns, but maybe start out with just kind of introducing yourself, because you've got other things, who you are. You've got this wonderful package of many things that identify the work that you do, Rebecca.
Yeah, all of my work, thanks, Judy, all of my work is relational. So I work with individuals, I work with couples and partnerships, and so much of what I'm helping people do is learning how to heal the relational templates that were passed down to them, and so that they can find more relational joy in their life.
Awesome. Relational templates. So I'm going to I'm going to ask some things just to kind of get a foundation for folks to know you too, because I am so curious when people are my podcast guests are showing up on the screen here and in our ears, that what is it about you, Rebecca, that brought you to where you are now as a relationship therapist? And maybe you can give us the Reader's Digest version about that.
You know, I think like everybody that I work with, I didn't grow up in a really secure relational space. And so I've been doing a ton of my own healing work throughout my life around relational health. And that is really what guided me in many ways to this work. I also, early in my career, was doing more work with kiddos and realizing hey, you know what? I was one of those kiddos once who needed support, but I didn't really need that support for me. I needed the support for the relational system that I lived inside of, for the ecosystem that was chaotic.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I want to back up just a little bit, because you and I as therapists, we use our jargon.
We use what did I say?
So the relational ecosystem and secure relationships. Some people may not even have a clue about what.
Let me slow that down a little bit. Yeah, thank you for that. When I talk about relationships, I often talk about an ecosystem. We all know what ecosystems are, like in nature. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. And so relationally speaking, we live inside of ecosystems also.
Yes.
We can either contribute to the pollution of those ecosystems or to the cleaning up of those ecosystems.
And then relating that to relationships, relating that to the family system. is you're making that connection.
Yeah. So just like we can pollute the environment outside, we can also pollute the biosphere, the ecosystem of our relationships, of within our love relationships, within our family system. We can either contribute to polluting that or to cleaning that up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, most of us likely have grown up in not so healthy ecosystems and secure, but you have decided to figure this out. Like you had this curiosity about you, right?
Yeah. So, here's the thing. I think that most of us actually do relationships pretty darn well, but we don't know that we're doing them well, and we don't know what to focus on to build on that.
Okay. Flesh that out a little bit.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever been hurt in a relationship, or have you ever hurt somebody in a relationship? So this is like for everybody who's listening, right? Whether we're talking...
Yeah, this is kind of like a rhetorical question, isn't it? Like,
of course we
have. We just like, of course we have, not intentionally.
Right. So we all know what it feels like to be hurt. And we all also, at some point in our lives, have been the person who has hurt somebody. We all have caused some harm. Okay, so that's a lot to reckon with right there. And it's the truth of relationships. All relationships go through a cycle of connection, disconnection, repair. We don't talk very much about what these cycles are because we are fed this kind of big lie through Hollywood and whatever, that all relationships are supposed to be long walks on the beach at sunset. Everything's supposed to be easy and right like that.
And you're supposed to like reach a plateau, right? You reach a plateau, you're happy ever after.
Right. And your partner's supposed to read your mind, and they're supposed to just, right? Like we can go on and on about this, but none of that is really matching with the realities that most of us live inside of.
Go ahead. I'm going to let you talk because this is great.
The truth of the matter is that all of us have these like history colored lenses that we wear. Right? That are based in like an unconscious, implicit sea of information that we have taken in through our entire lives, and some of which we've even inherited through generations that came before us.
That's big, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah. Like when we go through our stuff and we think it's just us, or we think it's, us and that other person. But you're saying this is like from generations way before you were even a twinkle in God's eye.
It can be. And it can, it could be like the way that we learn, relationally speaking, the way that we learn gets passed down. So, my mother might have treated me a certain way because that's how her mother treated her. That's how her mother treated her, right? And it goes back, God knows how many generations.
And it really is like the work that you and I are in, Rebecca. It's basically we're changing the family tree, aren't we? Or helping people to change their branch of the family tree.
This is the power of the work. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we can really change the legacy here. And so as we build awareness, right? That's the key. Is I think the key of the work of learning how to be in a healthy relationship. I don't even like the word healthy, but learning how to be in a secure relationship. That was the word I used before that you wanted me to kind of flesh out a little bit. And I want to come back to that in 1 second. Is really about learning how to observe ourselves in the moment.
Wow. Learning how to observe ourselves in the moment, bringing up that awareness.
Yeah, moment by moment, day by day. Like it's not like, okay, we're okay now, done. No, it's like we are constantly having to turn that. It's almost like there's a camera and you want to turn it and have it look at you.
Wow.
What am I doing?
Wow.
Can I see myself? Can I observe myself? Can I notice the ways in which I'm shooting myself in the foot in this relationship? Can I notice the ways in which I am contributing to the pollution of the ecosystem between us?
Wow. That's pretty profound, isn't it? You actually are touching on something, Rebecca, that I have addressed in my book,
throughout the themes, I use this acronym of breathing fresh air. But actually, when you fill your lungs up and then, breathe this fresh air, but the acronym is the A is awareness.
Yep.
And the I is intentionality. And the R is the risk of growth. So the way that I see it, I think you and I must be soul sisters in this work together, because that's exactly what you're talking about, is building this awareness, not just healthy, but this is the invitation of growing awareness in relationships.
Yeah, it really is.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Are you familiar with, and for everybody that's listening, the research of Ed Tronick and Claudia, through Ed Tronick and Claudia Gold's Power of Discord?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yes.
What I love about this research, and it works everywhere, like it works in the office, it works with business partners, it works at home with your kiddos, it works with your partner. But what I love about this is that it really focuses, when we come back to talking about security, that what it takes to have a secure versus an insecure relationship kind of is this little magic potion. About a third of the time, about 33% of the time, we want to have things go decently between us, right? There's a match, there's a connection, something happens and there's a response. It's like we're volleying in a game of tennis or something. It feels pretty good for both of us, right? Another 33% of the time, there's going to be a mismatch. We're going to totally miss each other. Okay, that's just going to happen. Let it go. And then another third of the time, there's also a mismatch. And one of us goes, oh, that didn't feel so good. Can we try? Can I reach out and try to reconnect, try to repair? It doesn't mean I have to repair, right? It doesn't even mean we have to feel good about it later. But one of us at least noticed it.
Wow.
That's security. That's it.
Oh my gosh. That I've never heard it explained that way, Rebecca. That makes so much sense. So you're saying a third of the time we're going to be like ping pong, back and forth.
And it's going to feel pretty good when we're ping ponging.
And it's going to feel good, yeah.
Yeah,
and that's for a secure. Are you describing a secure functioning relationship?
Yeah.
With that? I mean, because I'm thinking,
this whole thing is a secure functioning relationship, right?
Okay, yeah. Because for some people that might be 75%, or like the missing each other might be 99.999%.
Right, but the thing is, you get to miss each other. You get to miss each other, right? So if you go back to the other piece that I was talking about before, harmony, disharmony, repair. The harmony is the ping-ponging. The disharmony is missing each other. The repair is one of us is reaching out.
Oh.
And the repair doesn't have to be perfect. There is no, it's just that the intentionality is there.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. I see that I harmed you. I see that didn't feel so good. Help me understand.
That is huge. That is a key. And really, that is a difference between what John Gottman would call the masters and the disasters, right? I mean, I don't know if you have Gottman training or not, but I think you do, yeah. But is that what you're talking about? Is that where, like, okay, we've got this rupture in our relationship, and now we can repair it?
Yeah, I think the key here, right, is that when we can learn how to notice what is it that I have contributed to the discord between us.
That's the thing. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
That's the difference, right? Because it's
difference.
It's like I have to be able to say, can I tell you a story? A story about my relationship? Okay.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
All right.
I was going to ask you if you hadn't volunteered.
I think this is going to illustrate the repair piece.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So I have two colleagues that I work with a lot. Julianne Taylor-Short and Vicki Issa, and we run Terry Reel's relational life boot camps.
I've heard the three of you on your podcast, by the way.
Oh yeah, we have another podcast. It's called Why Does My Partner? It's super fun.
That's the one I heard, actually. Yeah. The Why Does My Partner? I can't tell whose voice is who, so I didn't know which one was your voice. So
yeah.
Listen.
So we have so much fun with this podcast, and we run these workshops together. They're like 2.5-day workshops, and we have so much fun doing them. And we had just led a workshop, and I had taught all of these human, like, relational skills for 2.5 days. And then, like, the next day, my partner and I had this super bumbly human relational rupture. Like,
I'm sorry to laugh, but I'm just telling you what you're telling me is just so familiar. Or it's so familiar. You do something wonderful, you come home and things have, okay. So I'm sorry to interrupt.
So I had just taught all these skills, right? Taught these people, like, this is how you have more relational joy in your marriages. And this is how you repair your relationships. And then I go home and I just bumble. And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, wait, I was just teaching these skills. I thought I was using them all in my own relationship. What isn't working? What was I doing wrong? So here's the thing. In retrospect, what I realized is I was holding on to a fix-it agenda. Right?
A fix-it agenda from all the things you were teaching? Or what?
No,
I mean, what do you mean?
With my partner.
Uh-huh.
I needed to fix something. So I had to slow down and do a U-turn.
Gotcha.
To kind of start rumbling with myself, to understand what had happened, and to kind of be a little humbled. You see, in the boot camp, we teach this really specific skill. It's called a direct request.
Okay.
And I love direct requests. In fact, I think that we're all born innately knowing how to make a direct request. Like when a baby is born, what does it do? It cries.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure. Yeah.
What does the cry mean? The cry means this is what I need.
Exactly.
Right? Whatever the thing is. It doesn't have words, but it tries. And then as we go through life and some of those needs don't get tended to, we start shutting down our asking for what we need. And it doesn't take all that long. And so what we're learning in teaching people how to do direct request is how to get back to that more primal state.
Wow. Wow.
And I thought I was practicing that skill with my partner. But here's the thing that I goofed. I made a direct request. And when he couldn't say to me, yep, can do that for you, I kind of didn't take it so good because I wasn't able to take his no for an answer. And that's the thing. He wasn't saying like, no. He was saying like, I can't do that now. And so what came up for me was that he wasn't doing it on my timeline. I had an agenda. I needed this to be fixed and I needed it to be done this way. And why? Because that's the kind of household I grew up inside of. I needed to do things on the timeline of the people who were raising me.
Wow. You know, so I want to hold this, Rebecca, because here you are, the therapist, and here you are, you have this heightened awareness. And this question just comes up for me personally here. And I don't know if husband is a therapist and he does that normally, like, you know, heightened awareness, like, how does that work in your marriage in which you know all this stuff? And then you're also maybe even, I'm thinking you might be seeing as yourself more self-aware that you can turn this thing around and you can look, but is that reciprocated? Is it necessary to be reciprocated? And how does that even work, being married, for him to be married to a therapist? And you, tell me more about that.
So after, like, I don't know, 15, 20 years of being together, I mean, for sure, I've rubbed off on him to some extent. Funny story, just the other day, he was telling me that somebody at the office where he works asked if they could talk to him about their relationship. He's not a therapist. He's a IT security professional.
He uses a different portion of his brain, right?
Totally different.
Is he a left brain? Because
you got it.
Oh my goodness.
So we really are really different. And there were many years in our relationship where I remember going, oh my gosh, am I going to outgrow him as I keep learning this stuff? So I hear the question. And the truth of the matter is that that isn't what has manifested. What has manifested is that the more one of us grows, the more it's like an invitation for the other to grow too.
Beautiful.
Systems work that way.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense. And so many times one is trying to control the other. If you would only this, or if your family was only that, or, we just kind of don't get into that awareness. But
And
it's
yeah.
like I talk about having like synchronized dances. I know Sue Johnson uses that analogy, but I use it all through my book. It's like how you dance together, and if one of you is growing and the other it's an invitation, that changes the dance between the two.
It really does. And here's the thing. If you can do the U-turn, if you can start observing yourself and looking at yourself in this, you want to know the most important thing that you stop doing? You stop foisting off your old wounds onto your partner. You stop foisting them off on them and saying, here, you take care of these old wounded parts of me. And you start showing up for those parts. And then it liberates your partner, and they can just start doing that piece for themselves of looking at their old wounded parts.
Wow.
And you're not taking care of their old wounded parts either. And then you can just both,
Who's really thinking about that they actually are like expecting their spouse to take care of their old wounded parts? It's not something that's conscious in us, right?
I mean, that's my mission. My mission is to make this relational language more conscious.
I gotcha.
Right?
Good for you.
So yeah, this is, I think of it like a language. Like I speak English and I'm not really good at so many other languages, but I dabble in some. But this relational language is one that I want more of us to speak.
I love that. Yeah.
Right? Because like if you were to have a conversation with a friend or a relative about what was going on in your relationship and it wasn't feeling so good and it wasn't going so good, and that friend were to be like, yeah, and you're right, and don't, and you should, right? Versus if you're talking to a friend and they're like, well, have you thought about what you were contributing to that? Have you turned around and looked at yourself there? Like that's going to shift things too. So I think more of us need to be able to speak this language.
Absolutely. And be willing to admit that it's kind of like cause and effect. It's kind of like, whatever, but you don't realize. I see it all the time when I'm working with couples. It's hard to see it in yourself, of course, but you can see it in other people really easy, right? You can see that when one is actually inviting to be accused by the other, right? And they don't realize, they think it's outside of themselves, but it's really internal.
It's really internal. And I think so often we're walking around with those history colored lenses on.
History colored lenses.
Yeah,
that is so true.
I steal that one from Jules. But yes, it's these history colored lenses. And so everything that I'm responding to through those lenses.
Wow. That is true. That is so true.
Right? So when there's like here's a fun one, again, about my relationship. My partner has this way of sometimes biting his lower lip. And I grew up in a home where when somebody bit their lower lip like that, it meant that I had done something wrong and that I should jump into trying to fix it. And there's this one, I used to get really reactionary whenever my husband would bite his lip. What's the matter? What did I do? And then he would be like, what do you mean? Why are you asking? Why do you always have to do something? Why can't this just be a moment? Why do you have to be it right? So like we'd get off to the races real quick right there. Well, there's one day I'm sitting there, he bites his lip. I'm sitting next to him on the couch and I hear the story in my head. What did I just do? Right? But I'm learning. I'm like in a deep place at this point. I put one hand on my heart and I just sit there with myself. Okay, Rebecca, what's happening right now? Did you do anything? No, you didn't do anything. Okay, wait, let's just take a look at him. And I look over. He's doing a Sudoku puzzle.
Interesting.
I was having a huge reaction. And I really was having a reaction to him biting his lip. But it was out of context. I wasn't looking at where he was now.
Wow.
How often do so many of us have those kind of moments?
I would imagine, I don't know what the percentage would be, Rebecca. Maybe you would know in your research how arguments get fueled by those very things. That this is not even real. This is not even what's going on between the two of you at all. This has everything to do with the story and the automatic thing that the brain remembers, right?
Yeah, it's not even that it's not real. It's that what you're reacting to now isn't happening now. It happened a long time ago.
in the past.
In the past. So the reaction is appropriate to the thing that you're reacting to, but it's inappropriate for the time and place in which you're having the reaction.
And that's a very grace-filled way of looking at it, rather than you're overreacting.
Yeah.
You're giving yourself grace. Well, of course I'm reacting this way because this is what happened in the past, but then, well, this is not the past. This is my husband. This is not whoever that was biting their lip and said,
right.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. Terry Real puts it this way. He says there's no such thing. There's no such thing as overreacting. It's just that what someone is reacting to may no longer be what is in front of them. You don't remember trauma, you relive it.
Wow.
You don't remember trauma, you relive it. And that is what is happening in so many of our relationships.
Which that makes so much sense. And that's quite a journey that a lot of people just don't even know that this is a necessary journey to take to be more aware.
I mentioned trauma just a second ago.
Yes.
And I think that this is a piece of what people don't really get is that, what is defined as trauma? How do we define trauma?
I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah.
Do define it.
One of my favorite definitions comes out of the work of Bonnie Badenoch, who teaches interpersonal neurobiology. And Bonnie says that trauma is any experience of fear and or pain that doesn't have the support that it needs to be digested and integrated into the flow of our developing brains. And that's throughout our lifetime.
Wow. That's worthy. I'm so glad. That's worthy for you to just say again, if you don't mind, Rebecca, because that's packed with some clarity. And can you say that again?
Of course I can.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is from Bonnie Badenoch. We define trauma as any definition of fear and or pain that doesn't have the support that it needs to be digested and integrated into the flow of our developing brains. Boom, right? This change is what are the things that have caused you fear or pain throughout your life that you didn't have support digesting and integrating?
When you talk about not having support, is that mainly support from the outside? Is that mainly, or are you thinking, because you said this happens throughout your life?
All of the above. So integrate, if you can integrate this because you have the inner resources and tools and you can do that, you can support yourself through it. Awesome. Great. If you have a wonderful therapist or friends that you can talk to, awesome. If you have good teachers or parents, great. But when you don't have the support, and when you didn't have it when you were growing up, you might not have learned how to have it as an adult, right? Those inner resources get built relationally. We learn how to be even with ourselves through how others are with us.
That's right. That is so the developing brain, not just in your childhood developing brain, but throughout
your life.
You can be 65, 70 years old. You still have a developing brain.
Exactly.
Interesting. Yeah.
So if you have the support to be with the fear or the pain, it's not going to get stored as trauma. Wow. If you don't have that support, that's when it gets stuck inside.
And to be with it, that doesn't mean to numb it. That doesn't mean to go out and smoke a joint. Doesn't mean to go out and, have a couple, 2 or 3 beers or get tipsy so that you don't feel the pain, right?
Or avoid the pain of relationships by overworking.
Okay. Yes. I know we're boiling this down. It's not just those substances. It's what we do.
It's food. It's exercise. It's the things we do. Right.
Yeah. It's homeschooling your kids for that matter. You could.
Whatever you get lost in that takes you away from digesting and integrating that pain and fear. The digestion and the integration is the important part.
So in a nutshell, how do you digest and integrate? Find a therapist like you.
Well, and good news, there's tons of us.
Yeah, there is.
There's tons of us, right?
Yes.
And I really am a fan of somatic experiencing. I think that's a great place to learn how to do this, but that's only one format of therapy if somebody's interested. I also think a huge part of this is listening to podcasts like this, starting to take moments with yourself, go for long walks in the woods and be with yourself. Develop this relational language and be with your friends in that language, and you can support each other. Right.
And some people do that through like journal writing too. Journal
Yeah.
writing can be so very helpful for sure.
Totally.
Meditation.
Yep.
Yeah. Yoga.
All of it can help as long as we're not bypassing the thing that's causing us fear or pain.
Gotcha.
Once we start bypassing it, we're not digesting it.
So we need to enter into it, need to enter and lean into that pain, and not so much be fearful that you're going to fall apart or be there forever, because some people fear that.
Yeah. There's this, have you heard of Resmaa Menakem's work? Resmaa talks about clean pain and dirty pain. Okay. And I love these distinctions. Dirty pain is kind of like when we sweep it under the rug. Right? When we go around the thing, when we bypass it in some way. Clean pain is what it's like when we're moving through it. Right? So in relationships, here's what I like to teach people. I like to tell everybody that awkwardness is really good. Right? We all try to avoid being awkward. We all want to be perfect. But being awkward is like a game changer in relationships. Because if I could be in a relationship with you and be like, hey, Judy, that thing you said, it just didn't feel so good to me. I don't like the way that landed. Can we have a moment with that? Can we talk about it?
And if I can show up and like, oh, I didn't mean that, and not try to fix or over, like, that's what we do. We don't want people to be like, oh my gosh. And then you feel it, right?
Right.
Wow.
But if I could just turn to you and say like, oh, that didn't feel so good, then we can have an authentic moment of connection.
Right? Yeah. Whereas most people will either, they'll avoid that. They'll avoid it.
And that's the problem. Right? Because now we walk around in our relationships avoiding the fear and or pain. We end up avoiding grief, essentially. Relational grief is what we avoid. And the cost of avoiding relational grief is that we don't get to experience relational joy.
Wow. When you reject what you would call negative things like awkwardness, grief, sadness, whatever, then you're really numbing those other emotions. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really, really hard.
Rebecca, this is so very valuable. I'm so curious because you've been on this journey, and how has your work transformed you?
I think my kiddos are going to have such a better chance at being relationally healthy adults. And I think a huge part of that, they're young teens now. I think a huge part of that is that I got to see the parts of me that were causing harm in my relationships. I got to see the ways in which that I was offensive, and that is hard to reckon with. It's like telling somebody who is highly intoxicated that you need to take their car keys away from them because they can't drive. Right? It is hard to tell somebody you're being offensive and for them to take that well. And when I can turn and look at those parts of me, it's so much easier to see the places where we're hurting than to see the places where we're causing hurt.
Wow. You're absolutely right. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And to lean into that reality about ourselves. It's that lack of awareness that causes the harm to ourselves and
to the people we care about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's hard then to face the reality, isn't it? That's what I'm hearing. Like, it's hard to face the reality
it's
of
not
that.
actually that hard to face once you start building that muscle.
I gotcha.
Right? Once you start building that muscle, you can lean into it. And then it's just, oh, I was a bumbly human again. Right. That's what I am. I'm a bumbly human. I'm not an awful human. I'm not a bad person. I just had a bumbly human moment because I'm a bumbly human and we're imperfect.
Oh, that is so grace-filled. That word is so grace-filled. I'm a bumbly human.
Yeah.
Yes. That is so good. That is so good.
Right.
Accepting the good, bad, ugly, the dark, the light, and just being real with yourself. That is like, it's our human struggle. Normalizing the human struggle.
Well, and that's really what it is, right? We're not trying to be anything other than human.
Absolutely.
Which is I think part of the problem is that so often we're trying to be perfect. And perfectionism is really kind of like, it's a form of grandiosity. Right?
Yeah.
And so it is something that causes harm. It causes harm to ourselves, and it causes harm to the people around us who don't feel they can either live up to our expectations, or if we don't live up to our own expectations, we have a long way to fall.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if we let go of that and we accept that being human means I'm going to be imperfect, it's a lot easier to be with all of that.
You know, being able to accept your own imperfections and then also having grace for the imperfections of others when they show up that way, right?
Right.
Wow, Rebecca, you're doing a remarkable work. What would you say to the listener who is experiencing this podcast right now and just and there's this maybe gut punch, maybe there's this aha moment, oh my gosh, like, and maybe they're going through some struggles in their marriage or whatever. What piece of advice would you give that person?
Be gentle with yourself. Right? Learn about self-compassion, radical self-compassion. Right?
Yes.
Learn about self-compassion. Find somebody that you can talk to, whether it's somebody in your church, in your synagogue, in your community, a therapist, a friend, a mentor. Find somebody that you can talk to, where you can just have the holding that you need to digest these moments. You don't need to do it alone.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful. Wow. This has been so very wonderful to talk with you, Rebecca. This is great. I mean, it really fills my love tank as a therapist to connect with you and just get your wisdom here. It's just, thank you so much. How can folks get in touch with you?
Folks can find me over at connectfulness.com or at whydoesmypartner.com, either one. They'll both take you to my work. My Connectfulness is my main website. And Judy, I should also mention that I think this spring I'm going to be opening a new community for folks that I'm calling Observing the Self. And so it's going to be like a little kind of clubhouse where we can do these U-turns and do them in community.
I love that. And, even the sound of your voice, you are so much in the profession that you are meant to be in, because it's just so inviting and so healing. So I have so enjoyed our time together. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it too.
All right. You take care.
This conversation with Rebecca was filled with such wisdom. Here's some things that stood out to me. Number one, when it comes to relational health, awkward is really good. Number two, it's important to digest and integrate fear and pain so we can also experience joy. And number three, be gentle with yourself. It starts with you to learn radical self-compassion. What stood out to you? Share your takeaways by going to betterrelationshipsbetterlife.com. Next week, we'll talk about conscious loving ever after with Gay and Katie Hendricks, a remarkable couple who have been pioneers in the field of body intelligence and relationship transformation. Keep in mind, you're not alone. There's hope and you're worth it. Until then, feel free to share, subscribe, rate, and comment. See you next time for Better Relationships, Better Life.